Welcome to this GraphQL course. In this episode, we are going to get started with the GraphQL and we will use the GraphQL JS library and how we can create the schema and the resolver with the server, everything in this episode. So let's get started with GraphQL.
To get started with GraphQL, first we need to visit this graphql.org website where you can get everything related to GraphQL. So we are going to first visit this code section. Here we can find the supported language for GraphQL, which is having almost every major language, but the simplest one is JavaScript. Now in GraphQL there are two things, like the server side where it handle all the GraphQL requests, and one which is the client side from where we can send the GraphQL requests. So in the client side, we have Apollo client, AWS, Amplify, GraphQL request, relay, many more. And on the client side, for the JavaScript, very simple is this GraphQL.js. One more, Apollo server is very famous, Express, GraphQL, Helix, and the GraphQL Yoga is again very famous. So we are going to start with this GraphQL.js. Let's open this in a new tab and see what it says. It first says that you need to create an empty npm project, npm init, then install this GraphQL. That's super easy. Let's do it. Here we have this app directory is empty. I'm going to open the terminal for this and let's maximize it for you. And I'm just saying npm init with a y flag so that I don't have to answer any more things. Cool. Now we have the package.json, so cd into app, actually just need to list libraries and files actually, so package.json is there, and let's open this with the VS Code. Okay, so now we are here. So next is we need to install this npm GraphQL. So let's run this command and it's going to store this GraphQL in our package.json. So let's open the package.json, and here you can see in the dependencies we have this GraphQL. That's right. Now what next? We need to create a server.js file, and then inside that we are going to write all these things, and then after that we will going to understand how things are going to work. First let's create a server.js file, server.js, and inside that let's just copy and paste it. So yeah, it's little complicated and we need to understand what's happening here, but for now let's just run this server.js. So node server.js, and we are running it and we get in the console hello world. Okay, so what it is doing, let's now understand. To understand what's happening here, let's first start with the first line. Very first thing we are doing is we are importing build schema and the GraphQL from the library we have installed, which is GraphQL. Then we are creating the schema. And what is a schema? A schema is telling us what we have to query. Query is simply saying what we want to get. So we want to get hello, and what will be the type of the hello is a string. So remember, when we ran this thing, we get a string in the response for the value for the hello. Okay, so this is the type query we are creating. Inside the query we are defining what we can query. So this is for the schema, and we can use this build schema function. After that, it says that, okay, you can query for hello, but what happened when you query for a hello? In that case, we need to actually define the resolvers. So what happened when you say, I want hello? It just go inside this root, or we can say resolvers, and then it's just going to run the function for the word hello. And this name should be exactly same. So what happened when you asked for hello, it will run this command. It just returning the hello world as a string, and boom, we are getting the hello world. Now what happened if I say 22 is a number? It's expecting a string. What happened here? Okay, so it has actually converted the number into this string. Very nice. But how we are querying, how we are saying to the GraphQL, hey GraphQL, I need hello. Okay, so how it's working? So remember, from the GraphQL library, we have imported this GraphQL function, and in this GraphQL function we need the schema, obviously this is schema. Then we need what we want hello, and then we need to provide the resolver, and when everything happened, we are just returning in the console. Okay, so this is understanding, and now let's do it. So yes, I removed everything, and now it's not having any server. So first let's say const, and I say require GraphQL. Inside this, first I need build schema, because we need to build a schema. Now I say const schema is equal to build a schema. Inside that, in the backticks, I'm going to say, hey, let's create a type of query, and this is going to give me the name, and name should be a string. Remember, previously we did the same thing. Now when you run this, what's going to happen? And let's start by this server. Still server doesn't have anything, so I'm just skipping the root or the resolver part. I'm just say give me the GraphQL. So GraphQL should be imported from the library GraphQL, and this need, as we have this, first need the schema, so schema. Second, it need what you want to query. So I want to query for, it should be inside as a string actually. I want to query for name, and when everything is done, actually dot then just log the response. Let's see what's going to happen. Now I'm running again, and now it says null. That's really amazing that that GraphQL says that, okay, you're trying to get name, but we don't have any resolver for this, so I'm going to return name. What if I say last name? We don't even have any query for it. What's going to happen? Now it's giving error that, hey, you cannot query for the last name because there is no query on the type of query. So in this type of query, we don't have any field for last name. So that's really amazing. When we queried for name, it's giving null. Now this means next we need to write a root, or we can call it resolver also. Now resolvers is simply an object of different resolver functions. So first I'm going to give name as a function which is going to return Sarthak. Now I need to say that root comes here. Now when you create the GraphQL, you have the schema here. What you want to get is this thing. How you get the result of, or the how you're going to resolve this name, use this root, and finally console log everything. Cool, Sarthak is here. Now let's have another resolver for email. It's also going to be the string, and obviously if we ask for email, it's going to give null, because yes, we have the query, but we don't have the resolver or the root. So say email is going to be returning Sarthak at bitfilms.com. And now if I run, yes, we are getting it. That's right, that's nice. That means we can also ask for name and email in one query. That's amazing. What we want, we are getting. How much we want, that much we are getting. Not less, not more. This is the power of GraphQL.
Welcome to this GraphQL course. In this episode, we will move from the terminal to the GUI, the graphical user interface. That means it's very hard to write the query in the terminal. If it is a simple query, that's okay, but for the complex query, you will never going to use the terminal. So how we can actually test the query we are writing? We need to use the GUI system, or a way where we can write the query, we can see the result, we can see the documentation, we can prettify our code, and everything can be done with a GraphQL. And let's see how we can use this GraphQL in this episode.
For now, we are just using the command line to interact with the GraphQL. And we don't want this because we always want to start a server and hit a route and then see the real magic. Also, in GraphQL, to check the GraphQL endpoints or the schemas, we have a very nice thing which is called graphiql. So it's like graphiql, graphiql you can call it. So this graphiql is actually a UI or an interface using which you can interact with your GraphQL API. How we can get this in our system? We just need to install the Express GraphQL, which we already know, and the Express server. So how this is going to work? Let's see. First, let's install npm Express. Then we need the Express GraphQL also, and we already have the GraphQL, so we don't need to install it. Now, these things are installed. So in our file, we just need to get the Express, and I want to just say require Express. After that, we need to create the app, which is just saying Express like this, and at the bottom I can simply say app dot let's first do a get request inside GraphQL, and then we will get request and response, and finally we just need to say response dot send, and sending hello GraphQL, and like this. Finally, app dot listen to, let's say, 8000, and I'm going to comment this GraphQL thing because we are having the Express. Now it's just going to actually we can log that server is running, but it's okay. So on this localhost 8000, I say /GraphQL, and you can see we are getting hello GraphQL. But we don't want this thing. We actually want to use the Express GraphQL, and for that we need to import the GraphQL HTTP and use it as a middleware for /GraphQL. Once you do this, everything will be set up. You just need to pass the schema, the root value, and if you want the GraphQL interface, then make sure it is true. Okay, so let's first say console.log server is running at localhost 8000 and make sure it is HTTP. Okay, that's done. Now, as we have decided, instead of get, I will say app.use on this GraphQL, and I want to use GraphQL HTTP, which again comes from Express GraphQL, and inside this we need to define some options like, do we need the GraphQL? And yes, we need it. Now this is done, and let's see what's going to happen if we are not providing other things. So one more time, restart the server is running at localhost 8000, reload it, and now it says GraphQL middleware option must contain a schema. Okay, so this is a middleware actually, and it says it need the schema. So schema is, we already have the schema which we have created in the last episode, which is this one, using the GraphQL library build schema, providing the query for name and email, and we also have the root. Now we have not provided the resolver, so let's see what's going to happen if we are not providing anything. Reload. This time it's having this GraphQL interface, and it's very nice because now we can simply query, and we can query for name, and if I run it, it says null. Remember, it's having null, either it's really null or it doesn't found the resolver. And yes, in this GraphQL HTTP we have not provided the resolver, or simply we need to say root value is root, which is having all the resolvers for our GraphQL query points. Next, we need to restart the server finally and reload this page, and this time you can see quickly we are getting it. We can also search for email, and the best part here is you have seen that if I say n, it says, hey, do you want name? And then if I say I want email, so it's suggesting the email also. Run it and we are getting these two things. Cool. Now since we are here, let's just understand what this GraphQL is. So GraphQL, as the interface, on the left you type the query, on the right you get the result. If you ever want to pass any variable, you can pass it here, like hello is having value of Sarthak, like this, maybe inside curly braces, but we will see this when we need the variable. Then if we are not having a prettified thing, you can just click here, it will just format it for you. And some merge, copy and history, you can see we have this history, we have search for name and email, so history is here. And finally, the most powerful thing on the GraphQL and also on the GraphQL type interfaces is this documentation. Documentation actually include each and everything for your query. So here we just see we have a query, and if we go inside the query says, hey, we have two fields. One is name, which is having a string, and email, which is having another string. If you want to go inside it, if you click string, it's a scalar type. So in GraphQL, any type is a scalar. So it's just a naming convention. But if you see int is a type, string is a type, so here every type we call it as a scalar. So string is a scalar type, which represent textual data, text data simply. Okay, so we get it how we can run the server using Express.js, using Express GraphQL, which was very simple. Getting GraphQL HTTP, creating the server like here, listening to 8000. But before that, we need to add a middleware, and for this GraphQL endpoint, and then we pass these things: the schema, the resolver root, and yes, we want the GraphQL. So if I say false and restart the server, it's not going to give you the GraphQL, and directly it says this because in the query we have everything searched. That's a simple thing actually. Okay, so let's now move to the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to this GraphQL course. Now it's time to really understand how the GraphQL send the request to the server. Actually, how GraphQL network tab works. So when you hit the play button on the GraphQL, what actually happened? What actually sent to the server through the Ajax request? So let's now see in this episode.
So till now we are using this GraphQL where we are sending this data and we are getting the real data, or sending the request and getting the data. But how this is actually going to work? So if I open the network tab, and if I click on this button, you can see actually a request is sent from this GraphQL, which is over the endpoint called GraphQL, which we have created here like this. Okay, now what it is sending, see, it is sending the exact query which we have written here. So you can see name, email inside an object. So this is actually in a string format. The whole query is in string format. So can we replicate this on our own? Currently we don't have any front end. So what we can do, we can use the console here and we can write a fetch query. So fetch is a JavaScript function which is going to send an Axios request. So where actually we want to send? So we want to send on GraphQL/GraphQL, but it's not good to write here. So what I'm going to do, I will first write it here, then cut and paste it there. So I need a fetch request on GraphQL, and then we need to define the method. Method is going to be a post method. How I know? Because on the network tab, if you check, this is actually a post request on the GraphQL endpoint. Okay, after this method, we need to send the headers, and the headers is first content type is going to be application/JSON, and similarly for accept. This means content type means we are sending JSON data and we also accept the JSON data. And finally, after this, we need to send the body. But remember here, body is actually inside the query, and the value for this query is the string format of our real query. So let's get it. So first, what we need to do, we need to use JSON, like here, JSON dot stringify, and the object is having query, and this is something like this. So I can give comma, and yeah, this is the thing. So now we have everything. We can actually cut it like here, and let's go here on this, and I'm going to say const result is equal to await. Since we are using fetch with all these things, now I need to give it like this. So result is here, but we need to get the JSON data. So I can say const data is equal to result with await sign, obviously await sign, result.json. Okay, now you will see the data is here. So data include the data field with email and the name, exactly like this. So this is the same thing. So when we have the front end, we just need to give this request from our front end to the GraphQL endpoint and get whatever we want, because this is GraphQL. So let's move to the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course. You know, GraphQL is fully typed. That means there are different types available in GraphQL. So in this episode, we will going to see what are the different types available in GraphQL. So let's understand the types in GraphQL.
Now, as we have seen how we can use the GraphQL, but let's dig into a little bit of theory and see what are GraphQL types. GraphQL is a strong type system, and it includes various types like scalar type, object type, query type, mutation type, and enum type. Among these, we have already seen scalar and the query type. I will show you how, but in this episode, we are going to learn about the scalar types only. So, scalar types are the types where you can only store single value. So there are 5 default scalar types. One is int, where you can only store signed 32-bit, that means only positive 32-bit integers. Then come float, which is double precision, that means decimal values, then string, as you know, and boolean true false, finally the id, which is unique identifier for each of the object you are getting. So these are the things, but how we can understand actually? So let's go here on this server.js, and here you can see I told you we have already seen the type for the query. So when you define the query type, this is the type, and that what is the type of this type is a query type. In this we have two fields. One is a name field, another is the email field, and both has a scalar type, which is a string type. So see, a scalar type is a string type. So here we have seen these two. Now, but we also have some of the others like int, float, boolean, and id. So let's learn about them. So I just want to add one more for age. And what if I say it should be a string? By default it should be a integer, but let's see what's going to happen. So let's have a resolver for this age. So this is going to return 2. But now here it's important thing. We have said that it's going to be a string, but we are returning a number. Let's see what's going to happen. So let's start the server, and I will reload, and I'll ask for age also. So GraphQL is smart enough that it can convert the number or integer into a string. You can see like this with inside the double quotes. Now what if I change it to int? So it's now become integer. Reload the server, so like here, and now if I one more time hit, you can see now it's converted to integer. That's amazing. Now what if I say age is 2.4? Now this become a floating number or a decimal number. What will be the reaction of our GraphQL? Let's see. So once you hit it, you said int cannot represent non-integer value, and that's exactly this is for. So now if you want the age to be a decimal valued or a non-integer value, you need to make it float. Once you done this and restart the server and hit it, yep, you can see it's a number, but a floating point number or a non-integer decimal number. So that's amazing. Now what if I say another field, which is developer, and this is going to be a boolean. Now with a boolean, as we know, it's a very easy thing. So let's create a resolver for this. Resolver is very easy, and I'm just going to return a string of true. Remember, this is a string, this is not a boolean thing. So what if I hit it? So I first need to ask for is developer, and now it says boolean cannot represent a non-boolean string true. This means I need to make it like here as a string, as a non-string, that means proper boolean, and yes, we are getting it. Now what if sometime in JavaScript we can also treat 0 as false and 1 as true? So is this going to work? Let's see. And yeah, it's working. That means GraphQL is converting 0 and 1 into boolean thing. So now if I say 0, it converted it into false. That's a really good thing. So this is all about the scalar type in GraphQL. In the next episode, we will move to the next type, which is object type. Also, I'm going to install NodeMon because I don't want to restart the server again and again. And for that, I just search for NodeMon. It's inside the npm, and I copy and kill it, paste it. And when it is done, we just need to say NodeMon server.js file, and I can create a command here. So in the package.json, we have a script. I can say dev is going to be NodeMon, and it's like NodeMon and server.js. Is it like this? I think I just need to select here. what it says, overwrite. Okay, now I can say npm run dev, and yeah, that's cool. It's running, and if I say 1, save it, restart it, and it should be true, which is great. Let's move to the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course. This is the episode for the types and specifically the object type. So what are object type, how we can write it, everything we will see in this episode.
The GraphQL object type is extremely important when you have lots of fields related to one thing. So what is an object type in GraphQL? So it represents a group of fields. As I said, the group of field is actually composed of multiple scalar type, or it could be another object type. And an example of object type, how you can create it, you just define the type, then the name of the object, then field 1, field 2, and these should be scalar, or it could be object type also. An example is a type student. A student name can be a scalar type of string, age can be a scalar type of int, and it could also have another field called let's say class, which is an object of class. Okay, so if it is confusing, let's go to the code and see how it's going to work. Now for here we have all these things related to a person, so why not create a object type which represent a person? Or since we are having a developer, let's create a developer. So I'm going to create a type, so I need to use the type keyword and the name of the object. Just like we have created the query type, we are going to create our object type. An object type is developer with a capital D. And now here I'm going to define what are the fields on this type. So first it should have name, which is going to be string, the email, age is developer, obviously true, so I think I don't need, and I don't need age, so I can replace the age with like language. So language should be once again a string, but I want some like experience, maybe experience. So yeah, now I have int. Okay, so here this is the developer type. How we can get the developer? So this object we have already created, how we can query? So let's say I'm going to query for Sarthak. Sarthak is a field in query, so I query for Sarthak, and Sarthak is having a type of developer. Okay, so that's very easy, isn't it? But what if I go here and run it? Everything is failing because we don't have any query related to name, email, and age. We just have is developer, which is true. Now, how we can get the Sarthak? So here, if I say Sarthak, it seems like we have some error. It says cannot query field Sarthak on type query. Why is that? Let's run it. It says must have a selection of subfield. What's that mean? So since you are asking for Sarthak data and Sarthak is an object, so you cannot just send all the things because GraphQL is all about the specific thing. So now GraphQL says that, hey, yes, I know something about the Sarthak, but what exactly you want for the Sarthak? So Sarthak can have name, email, and the experience. So let's search by providing this curly braces, and I want the name only. Now, once again, if I run it, it says it is null. Why it's null? Because we don't have any resolver for the Sarthak. Okay, so let's create a function called Sarthak. And here, since it requires name, email, and experience, I can return first name, which is obviously Sarthak. And let's see what's going to happen. Now, if I run it, boom, you can see we are getting name. That's really great. Now, what if I just say here email also? So email is sarthak@bitfilms.com. Cool. Run it. We are not getting email because we have not asked for it. So let's ask for email. Yes, we are getting. Now what if I ask for experience? Run it. It says null because we have to provide the detail. And the best thing about GraphQL is that if it not find any field, it's just returning null, no error. So let's say 6 and run it. That's cool. So this is the power of the object field. Okay, since you are having the ability to choose the thing you want for certain data, that's how you can get what you want. And as I told you, an object can be can have a field with another object. What that mean? Now, I want developer, but developer could be a person. So I can say type person, and this person include name and email because every person has a name and email. Okay, and now I can say developer is having a new field called profile, and profile is a type of object person, which include name and email as the scalar type. So at the end we are reaching toward the scalar types, but if a group of scalar type, we call it object, and object can have another object as the type for any field. Since we have changed the developer and Sarthak is a developer, so if we ask for name, it's not going to work because this name is now inside another field called profile. This means we need to just modify our resolver. So this now include profile, which is having these two things. And now if I go and if I see here profile, yes, you can see autocomplete is there. Inside that I want name, and this is how it's working. So after that we can also ask for experience, and yes, we are getting what we want. So this is for the object type, which is extremely important. So we have learned about the query type, which is absolutely important to query what we can get. Then we learn about the scalar types, and then we learn about the object type. Let's move to the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course. Now it's time to understand the query type. So we have learned about the object type, but now it's time for the query type, how we can write the query. We actually have seen how we can write the query, but let's understand in details. Let's start with the GraphQL query type.
Next important type is query type. So query type is the request sent from client to GraphQL server. Query type is the root level type, as we already know, and GraphQL uses schema definition language to define the query. We already know how we can write the query, but what is this schema definition language and why we need it in GraphQL? Why another language? So what happened is GraphQL is not connected to any language, any specific language. So in order to make GraphQL accessible from any language using a single, you can say, structure, we are defining a new language called schema definition language. So using SDL, we write the query. And how we write the query? It's very simple. We use the term query when we define the query type. Then similarly, field and the data type. And data type would be the scalar type, can be an object type, and an example is name with a data type of string. So this is about the query type theory, and let's see in reality. So we have already seen how we can write a query type in GraphQL. So this is actually the SDL, schema definition language. This is exactly similar to other way, and if you are familiar with the JavaScript, it's an object kind of thing, but it's not a key value pair, it's a field type pair. So here on the left side of this colon, we are defining the field name, what we need to query, and what will be the return type for this field. So isDeveloper is a boolean, and similarly Sarthak is a object type of developer type. I think this is not a big deal because we understand what is query. So now let's move to the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course, and here we are going to have the list type. So we can use the different collection of simple types. So we can have a collection of strings, collection of integer. So collection can be called also as a list. Let's understand the list type in GraphQL.
Next important type is list type. So list type can be represented as an array of values of a specific type. So it could be object, it could be scalars and enums. And by the way, we will see what is enums. So it's just a collection of different types. So how we can learn about this more? Let's go to the VS Code and open the server.js file. So here we have never used any you can say list type. So how about having maybe list of emails? So I want to have a list of emails, so I can just put it inside an square brackets or angle brackets, you can call it. So this is now representing a list of string, which we call it as a type field. Now if I open the server and go to here, and if I search for Sarthak, and I need the profile, inside profile I need a name, obviously. So that's going to work because name is not a list. But what if I try to get the email? Let's see what's going to happen. Now it says expected iterable, but did not find one for the field called person.email. So here is the thing. We have defined that the person email should be a string, array of strings. And here, when we are resolving the Sarthak, we are not giving as a iterable as an array. So what we can do, we just need to wrap this or return an array always if even we have a single field, because that is the list type. Email is a list of string. Now if I hit enter, you can see this become a list of string. So in this way we can send more data. Now enough of the dummy data we have, so let's remove each and everything from this resolver, and I'm clearing out each and every other thing because I have this users.json file where I have array of 2 objects. Each object include ID, name and email of the persons. So this means we can once again get back our person object type, and here we define name as a string and email as a string, not an list. Okay, that's it. But here now I want users, and users is going to be the array of person type. So when we calling for users, we should get more than one, or at least one, or maybe 0, but all of them could be the inside the list, inside the array. Okay, so how we can resolve it? So we have to create a resolver for users, and this is going to return, for now I'm just going to return an array where I'm going to say name is a and email is, I'm not going to give any email for now, because I want to show you how this is going to work. And B, save this. And now let's see if I say here users, but since users is a type of person, yes, it's a list of person, but at least every user is a person type, and person has name and email. So we can ask for users name. Now if I hit, you can see we are getting all the users we are returning from the resolver. And if we want email, obviously since we are not returning, it's going to be null. But let's have the dummy data we have on our JSON file. So const user data, users data is equal to require, and requiring from base directory users.json, and inside this, instead of returning this dummy data, I'm going to return the users data we have from the JSON file. So this is good, and we can also directly return it using the arrow function, and that's cool. Now once again run it, and you can see we are getting the list of all the users we have from our database, from our JSON file, and whatever we require, it is going to give you exactly like that. So let's now move to the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course. Whenever we use any kind of API, then it should be something that we can pass the data to have a precise result. This means we are going to learn in this episode how we can actually pass some argument into the GraphQL query so that we can get the precise data. So let's understand about the passing argument in GraphQL.
In any API, if we need to get some particular data, if we need to update or delete anything, we need to pass the ID or maybe slug, or sometimes we need to pass various things just to complete our query. And that should also be true in GraphQL API. So how we can pass the arguments in GraphQL API? Why? Because when we see this kind of query to fetch the data, yes, we are fetching, but it's not a get request. If we see the network tab, it's all a post request, and the payload or the data is not controlled by the user, it's controlled by the GraphQL query. So all we are sending is a query. So there should be a way where in the query we can define what is the ID or what is the slug we need to get. So how we can do this? So in GraphQL, the arguments in a schema language, remember GraphQL is using the query which is defined in schema definition language, is type checking happen automatically, and each argument must be named and have a type. So how we can do this? We are getting all the users. We have two users in our JSON file. Remember, we have this JSON file, but every user is having some ID. This is cool. We can get the user through ID. Now what I'm going to do, I'm having one query here which is having an array of person for the users. But what if I want to get a single user which is just going to be a person? Okay, so let's create a resolver for this. So I say user, returning a function, and for now I'm just going to return the first ever the data we have for the user. This means if we try to get the user name, just the user name, and if we send it, yes, you can see we are getting Sarthak. But again, we need to get the user from the ID, through the ID. So how we can get that? This means first we need to update our query, and we need to say when we define the name of the field or the name of the query, we need to use this parenthesis. Inside that we can define what we are getting. So we are getting ID we are accepting id actually. And what is the type? Remember I told you each argument must be named and have a type. So name is id, and what is the type of this id? It's a integer. Okay, so this means yes, we can accept the id here. So here we get the data, or we can directly destructure it saying it is a id, and we can just return this. But along with that, to check what we are getting, we can console the id we are getting here. So now server is restarted and we are not passing anything, but we are since accepting. Okay, I need to actually return this also so that it will work, but it doesn't matter. The point is, you can see undefined. The id we are getting, the console log we are doing for the id is undefined because we are not passing anything. But remember, this is very handy thing. And in this GraphQL, here is the docs, and it's having for the query. So let's click on query. I think I need to reload it to have, yeah. Now see this user user. What is user? So user accepted the id as an integer. So how we can do that? We can just say, let's close the documentation, parenthesis, and give the id as 1. Now since we have passed 1, it's confused that what is 1. So we need to actually define the key and value. So what is the key, or what is the field we need? So it's a id, and the value of id is 1. So id with the integer value, which is 1. Cool. Now let's hit it. Still we are getting Sarthak, but on here you can see we are getting 1. This is amazing because now we can get the data according to the id we are getting. So I can just remove these things and say user data dot finding where user id is exactly equal to the id we are passing. Okay, so server is restarted and hit enter. Yes, we are getting Sarthak, but if we change the id, yes, we are getting John. Now what if I say any id which is not exist, like 23, and we are getting user as null? We don't have any user. So that's the power of GraphQL, and here it is the passing arguments. So we will see the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course. Here we have the query, but now if we want to update the data, to delete, to update, delete, and create. Yeah, third is create. So just query type is to get, is to fetch something. But if you want to modify some data in your database or somewhere else, just the modification, you have to use a mutation type. Let's understand how we can start with the mutation type in GraphQL.
Next is mutation type. So what is mutation? Mutation simply means changing or updating anything. So if we are saying that we are going to do the mutation, this means we are either doing create, update, or delete, or simply saying other than getting anything. So mutation are the operations sent to server to create, update, or delete the data. What we do to get the data, we do the query type. Okay, so this is as simple as making the API endpoint part of top level mutation type instead of top level query type. So enough slide, let's go here on the coding part. So server is running and I will open the server.js file. Here we are having a type for query in the build schema. So we need one more type. We just use the type keyword, and with the capital M we say mutation, and just like we do the query thing, we are going to define a mutation. But where we are going to do, currently we are fetching the user from here, but instead of this I'm going to create a variable, or actually let's say fake db, and this is going to be an array. Okay, now what I want in this fake db, I want to add one message. So I can say add message, or I can use msg for the message, and it's going to return the string. But obviously when we are adding, updating or deleting something, we always need to send some data to the server. So how we can send the data, we already know. We just need to use this kind of notation. This means we just say I need a message, and that message should be a type of string. That's cool, but how we can handle this, how we can create the resolvers? Just like we do the resolver for the query, we need the same resolver and the same place. It's like msg, and as before we will get the msg, that means message, the data we are having, and then simply we can say fake db dot, or fake db first dot message is equal to msg. Okay, this is going to work. That's very easy. So since we have created the mutation name is this, and the resolver is there, let's go to the server and see how this is going to work. Just reload this, and when we define the query, yes, we can do the query easily, but there is another way to do the query. We can just say query keyword here, and that's also going to work. So now, but since we want to do the mutation, we need to define that, hey, I am doing the mutation part. And when you do the mutation, it says, hey, there is no mutation called user. And if you don't know what mutation or query you have, the documentation is your help. So here we have root type is a query and the mutation. If you go on the mutation, you can see add message, where you need to pass your message. Okay, let's see. Add message, and message is this is my first mutation. Okay, that's easy. Let's hit it, and it says cannot set property of undefined setting message. So it says you don't have this message as the first one. So what we can do actually, we need to define it as let's say as a object, and then we can just say the fake db.message is going to be msg message. Now once again hit it, and yes, you can see since we have defined in the mutation that I want to get back the string when we done with this thing, so we are getting back. Now how we can verify that it's really available in the fake db? So let's create a query, and it's get message, and this is only going to return the string. So similar to this, get message, and this is just going to say fake db dot message. Okay, so now let's copy this thing, or actually I can open this in a new tab and reload both of these pages. So first one is for the mutation, second one is for the query. So I want to query get message. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to just send this, because this doesn't need any kind of data, so it's simple get message, and it's null for now. But what happened if I add this mutation? So I have added the mutation. Now if I get it, yes, you can see this is my first mutation, because the server is running and this fake db is holding some value. So this is the power of mutation, where you can actually add something. But we have more on this mutation, so let's go on the next video and see how we can really define some input types, which is very important in the mutation type. So let's move to the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course. In reality, we have to use a database where we store all the data, the source of truth for the data. But we are learning this GraphQL. We don't have to focus on the database, or maybe later we will do. But For now, let's create a fake DB and see how we can do all the CRUD related things mostly in this fake data using the GraphQL mutation query and everything. So let's learn about more in this GraphQL course.
We know the mutation is very nice to create, update, or delete any data. But things get interesting when you have similar kind of data you are passing in various mutations. So now let's work on this. So what I have created is in this fake DB, I have an array of two objects which is having the office and rent, co-working space, and the rent per hour, obviously. Okay, now let's add something, or yeah, so first I need to create a new mutation called create space, and obviously this space need two things, name and the rent. Okay, so I need the name, which is going to be string, and the rent, which is also going to be a string. And once done, then this is going to return a type called space. Yeah, we don't have that space type, so let's create the type space, and this space type include name, which is going to be the string, and rent, which is also going to be the string. For now, obviously this should be a number, but for now this is a string. Okay, so let's create the space, and to create the space we obviously need the name and the rent. And once we do this, then we say fake db dot actually we need to add it. So how we can add, let's have the third one, fake db, and in the third one is an object with the id of 3, and it comes name and rent. Okay, so this will become name with the value of the name and rent with the value of rent. Okay, so this will going to create the space. Let's try this. So reload this page and this page. This time I'm going to do the mutation for create a space, and create a space need two things as it says. First is name, so let's say name is hotel, and second rent is let's say $15 per hour. Okay, so this is done, and it's going to return the space. So what we need, so let's say we need the name and rent both. Okay, let's return it, and yeah, you can see we are getting what we have created. But how we can verify that it is inside the db? This means we need to have a mutation for get space with the id and having the id type, which is very important. It's exclamation means required, and it's going to return any space, and this is also going to be the exclamation mark, that means required. Okay, so this is also going to be required like this. So one more time, get a space. So let's say get a space where we get the id, and we simply say by fake db dot find where db, or I can say space dot, oops, what's that, space dot id is equal to the given id. Simple one. So we have already created, let's say get a space with the id of 3, and I think we need to do one more time. So create it and now get it. Okay, so it says you need to do these things, cannot read the property of undefined id. So it says it's not inside the db. Right, id, it's something weird is here happening. So to debug this, first I can just return it like this, and above it I can do the console log for fake db, and that's good. And this is done. Now if I try to fetch the third one, still having the same, but you can see we don't have the id 3 here. Okay, so let's add it. So I'm going to add it, and then I'm trying to get it. Now it's added, but it's added at the third place, not at the second place, or I can say third index, not at the second index. So that is because I have hard coded this thing. So instead of hard coding, I can say fake db dot length, simple. And same for the id, like this. Okay, so this is good. And one more thing is it's having id as number, and everything we send from here is a string. This means we need to remove this strict comparison, and this will going to solve our problem. So everything is fine. I can restart so that its fake db is cleared, and I'm going to create the new mutation. Yeah, hotel is created, and I'm going to get the second id with the second. So id second is having coworker, so let's see, it should work. Yes. And what about 3? And still it's not getting it. What happened? Maybe I can create it one more time. Okay, yeah, so it was not created. So now we have the third one. Now what if, since we have used the fake db length, so this means if I say fake hotel 2 with a $20 per hour, it should be created. And if I try to get the fourth one, like here, yes, you can see we are getting. So this is great. And now once again we need to see what is input type in mutation. So we have seen how we can really communicate with the database, although it's a fake database. So let's now see the next big thing in GraphQL. Welcome to the GraphQL course. When we use the mutation, we send the data for update, for delete, for creating. Basically, when you update and create, you have to give a lot of data in that mutation query. Why I call mutation query? It's just a mutation. So in the mutation, you have to send the data, but that sending the data is also has to be some format. So let's understand about the input type, where we define what we are going to input in the mutation create or update mutations. So let's understand the input type in this episode. Okay, so now let's work on the input type. And what is input type? So see, when we create the new space, we need to pass name and rent. What about update space? So when we update the space, we need the id, which should be required. So this exclamation mark means required. Then we need to pass the name as a string. We need to pass the rent as string, and obviously once updated, return me the updated one, the space. Okay, so this is good and everything will work fine. So we can actually create the update space where I can get the id, name and rent, actually not the email. So yeah, I have added rent. Okay, so once we have these things, we can say const index, and in our case actually the index is id -1 because we have started with id 1 for the index 0, so that's why. And I can say fake db get me the index and give me the id as the id, but name as name and rent as rent, and finally return me this new updated one. Okay, so this is once again going to work. So if I try to create new hotel, it's working, and if I try to get this okay, sometimes it's not working. Yeah, it's working. Okay, so this is getting it, but I want to create the I want to update the space. So when updating the space, I need to pass the id. So id is 3, so I can say name after this. Why it's input, not input? Okay, so now it's needed the name, and I can say updated hotel, and obviously the rent is the original rent of $15. Okay, so once we done with this, we need the name and we need the rent. Yeah, so we are repeating these two things here and here, name and rent. So when we are seeing, so when we see that we are passing the same fields for different mutations, this is a good time to create the input type. So I just need to use the input keyword with the type name, input type name, so which is a space input. And this here we need to just define what it include. So this actually include the scalar, obviously not an object, not another thing. So name is a string, rent is a string, and now instead of passing this, I can say I need the input. Input is having a type of space input. Same thing we can do here. So it's a input of a space input. What that mean? That means instead of getting name and rent, I can get the input. Okay, and actually I can destructure once again name and email from the input, but it's good to show you like this. So input dot name and rent is input dot rent, and same thing I have to do here, because I'm not getting rent or name, I'm getting input. So I need to change it like this. Okay, that's done. Okay, now what I can do, I restart the server so that all these fake data we have added is going to destroy it. And first I'm going to update with the id of 2, and now it says, hey, you don't need the name and rent, you need the input field. So input is a thing, but input is an object. Okay, so yes, this input need the name and the rent. Once we have done with the data we need to pass, we can say that, okay, after completion, I need return back the name and the rent. So updated name is there, and yeah, this is here. So let's get for the second id, updated hotel. Cool. So this is called the input type, which is extremely important in the mutations. That's really amazing. So now let's see the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course. When we are creating or when we are writing the query, suppose we are writing query for getting the users, but we need to also write the query to get the users who are online. So how we can write the same kind of query but in a single query? So we need to do the two different things, two similar things actually, in a single query. In that case, we need to alias the two different sections of the query. And after that, if we have the same data in both of the queries, like getting all the user and getting online user, we need to get the name and email of the users. So it's not good to repeat yourself, make it dry code. So we need to use the fragment for that. Let's understand the alias and fragment in this episode.
We are getting a user here with the id of 1. That's really great. But I also want another user, so it could be a user 2. So I can say with the id of 2, I need the name of that user. But what happened? I can only query one user at a time, because it says, hey, it's a conflict. Which one I should run? So if I want the second one, I need to either comment or basically remove this thing. Then I can get the detail for the John. This is not good thing. So what we have to do actually, we have to create a naming system for each query. That means we need to give the alias for each of this. Okay, so what we have to do here, first we need to give the name like Sarthak, and since we know the name, you can give this Sarthak, or you can simply say user 1 or user 2. With a colon sign, you are defining, okay, this is the name for this query we are giving here. Okay, that's very simple. And now if you run both of the query at the same time, you are getting the details for both of the users at same time. This is really amazing. Let's get the email for both user also, and here we are. That's really amazing to see that we can actually fetch the same kind of details from the database for two different queries, two different similar queries. It's very weird, similar, different. But by doing this, we are having another issue. What that issue is, you can see the user one, what detail we are fetching, name and the user, name and the email. What I'm saying, name and the email. Second user, we are again getting name and the email. This is good just for 2 field, but what if we are fetching 10 field, 15 field for user 1 and user 2 both? It's not good to rewrite. We have to make our code dry. Don't repeat yourself. How we can solve this problem? Now, GraphQL provide you amazing thing which is called fragments. So how we can define the fragment and what it is? Basically, we are going to move these field into a variable, or they call it fragment. So I just need to say fragment and then the name of the fragment. So it's a user fields. Okay, but it's giving some kind of error, and the error is not okay. So I have to define on which type. So whatever the type we have defined here, different type like person type, space type, then if we press control and space bar, then we will see all the things we have. So is this a person type, space type query? So obviously it's a person, so we are creating a fragment for the person and passing this name once again here. And then what we have to do, we just need to spread this here, so like this and like this, not this, like this. Okay, prettify it, and that's cool. Now one more time, the same result is here. Now when you want to add one more field, you just need to say, hey, give me another field. If you have, we don't have it. Okay, so if we can remove it, and yes, this is going to work. So this is called the fragment and the alias in GraphQL, which is extremely important to make your code super efficient and beautiful. So let's move to the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course. We have understand how we can alias, how we can create the fragment, but it's very often that we are not going to use hard-coded input things in our query. So if we want to get a single user, we are not going to hard code ever any ID or anything related to the user. So what that means, we need to use the variable in the query directly, so that the query become dynamic with the variable value. How we can use the variable in this episode?
You know, when you work in real life, you will not going to pass the ID like hard-coded one or two. It should be dynamic, right? So dynamic means it should come from a variable. So if you are searching for any user, you don't know who the user is. You know the ID and you should pass that ID here. So the point is how actually we can pass the variable data in our query. That's the point. And if you look here at the bottom, you will find the query variable tab, and here is a space where you can give an object with a obviously key value pair for your variable. So what if I define here my variable as ID with a double quotes obviously, and then the number is 1. Okay, now here comes the point. We have defined the variable, but now it says variable $id does not appear in GraphQL query. So we have defined it, but we are not using it. This is the functionality of GraphQL. So how we can use it? First, as the you can say error says $id. This means we need to use the $sign and the variable name. So we have passed the $id, but now it says variable $id is not defined. Hey, we have actually defined it here, and you say that you have not used it. I have used it. So what's the issue? The issue is we are actually passing this ID, but we need to accept this ID for our query. How we can accept? Remember, we need to give this query a name. So if I say query, this is also going to work. So let's make it 1 again. Yes, it's working. Now what if I give the name to this query? So I say get user. So get user. Okay. Now if I run it once again, still working. Now comes the point. When you name your query, then what you can do, you can just use this parenthesis. Inside that you can accept the variable. So what variable we have? We have a $id. That's cool. So now it's simple. We can pass it here. Now see here, no error. That means it's getting the ID, but we have one error here. It says, hey, something is missing. So remember, the GraphQL is all typed. That means we need to define everything as a type. So we have defined the ID, but we have to give the name, not name actually. We have to give the type name. So what's the type of any ID? ID always has to be the number. So it says you are not using it because we have error. But when I say int, it's a type, the error gone from here and from here. This means now GraphQL, this interface, is happy with our code. And now if we search, the ID of one is Sarthak, run it, still getting the Sarthak. But now I want to have the IDs for both user. So I can change user 1 ID, and similar to this, I can say I want user 2 ID, like that. So any variable we define, we need to accept it here. So I just say, hey, it's a user 1 ID, which is going to be int, comma, user 2 ID, and in this way we can just pass user and user 1 underscore ID, and here comes user 2 underscore ID. So this is the simplest way, but here also we have to define like here. Cool. So we have done with this, running, and it says, hey, something is missing here. So something, okay, so we don't need the comma here. So after removing, it's okay. And now, yes, you can see we are having it. Now what if we swap the result or swap the ID number? Now we are getting the reverse result, and this is actually the power of variables. But the real power comes, what if I don't have any variable, but still I want to use the variable thing? That means if the variable is there, then use the variable value, otherwise give some default value. So for now, if we run it, it says null because we are passing both of these as null because we don't have any default value. So when we don't have any default value, then let's see what actually network is sending. So if I send it GraphQL payload, and in the payload you can see it's $user ID variables is null. So this is the point. But if we get back our variables and then send it in the new query, the payload variable is actually an object with the details. Now what's going to happen when we once again remove it? It's going to give variables as null. So in this case, I want to define the default value for these two. It's very simple. After you define the type, use the equal to sign and the default value. So it should be 2. Now if I send it, you can see we are getting it. Let's see what we are having on our network tab, what actually we are sending here. So if we see variable is still null, oops, that's not going to be okay, no issue. So variable is still null, but here we are passing the value as default value 1 and 2. Now suppose you don't want to give the name to the query. It's not an issue, just remove the name and it's also going to work, because the point here is to pass these variables in your query directly like this. So whether you have the name or not, it totally doesn't matter, because naming is just to have couple of queries with the same kind of or different kind of data, and you can alias them, so giving them the name. That's great. So this is all about the variables and how we can use pass variable, define the default variable. Wow, define the default. I'm becoming poet. So now what we have to do, we have to learn the GraphQL, and this means let's see the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL. Here in this episode, we will focus on the directives. So directives are used on the field to modify it, and how we can use what are some inbuilt, you can say, directives given by the GraphQL, we will see in this episode.
So far we have seen how we can use the variable to make our query dynamic, but it would be more dynamic if we can actually get the fields we want dynamically. So suppose I want to get the name and the email. That's good, but I want to have some other fields, and to show you how this is going to work, I have used some of the things, and like pet and the pet name. So tiger is a pet. Yes, my pet is tiger, and my pet name is Tig. And similarly, blue whale is Neela, crocodile is Kroku, crocodile doesn't have any pet name, and tiger is Sheru. Okay, so these things are there. That means we need to update our user or person type, where we just need to say, hey, it should be a pet also, and one is pet name. Okay, now the point is I want to have the pet details when I want to query for that, and I'm not going to have the pet name and pet always. So if I do this, it's giving error because I need to reload, and now it's done, and you can see it's always giving to going to give me the pet and the pet name. That's not true. I only want to have when I want. So how we can use this thing, and along with some amazing thing called passing the variable into the fragment. So first let's see how we can pass the fragment, pass the variable to fragment. It's very easy. Since this fragment is used inside the query, that means all of the variable can be accessed inside this fragment. This means we can just we can just remove these things because we don't want, and just mark it 1 and 2. Okay, now what I want is I want to have a variable which is like dollar include where is C? Include, yeah, include pet is the variable, and for now it's going to be a boolean, and value is going to be true. Now this include pet variable will come through this query into this fragment, and now I'm going to introduce you with a directive thing. Okay, so what is a directive? Directive is a thing which you can use with @, and now the GraphQL by default provide you 2 directives. So see, this is directive because it actually send a message. It direct the GraphQL to include or skip any field. So I want to include this field only if, and what is the if condition? Include pet is true. Same, I want to have this like here, so I can paste it if I have copied properly. Yeah, so pet and pet name will only be included if we have this variable name true. So let's run it. Yes, it's there. Now what if I make it true? I make it false. What I'm doing? So I make it false. Run it. You can see now we have the power to dynamically add or remove any field from the query, because see, the power of GraphQL is to get what we want. We don't want unnecessary data. So if we are always getting the pet details, we don't want that. So we have this condition that okay, I only want these things when I want. So just like include, as we said, we have a escape. So I can say if, like escape, if condition is include pet. So I want to have include pet like this, and copy, and when I include pet, I don't want the email, so let's have the name actually, and also the ID maybe, because we also need the ID, so we need to add it here. ID is int. Okay, and actually I want to use the bang sign or exclamation sign that I always want, so it always returns something. It should never ever be null. Okay, so if I run it, yes, we are getting, and see, it's since it is false, so it's not including the pet. But if I make it true, then it should remove the email and include pet and the pet name. Wow, that's great. So we don't have the email, we have the pet and the pet detail. Let's see some other funny pet names. So fourth one doesn't have the pet name. What about third one? Okay, Crocu. So crocodile is Crocu and tiger is Tig. So let's now see the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to GraphQL course. Now suppose you have a query where you want the gender of the user. So gender could be male or female, just two. It's not going to have more than one, and we are focusing just on two genders. Okay, so when we create a new user, we need to enforce our user to only pass either male or female. How we can enforce this thing? And when we use the GraphQL type interface to write our query, how we can do something so that we can get the auto suggestions? This is me. This means this is what this is mean. This means we need to use the enums in GraphQL. So let's understand the enums in this episode.
Next important thing is this enum or enumerator. Enums or enumerator types. So what these enums are, why we need it, that's a very important thing. To know why we need it, let's once again go here, and I'm going to clear all these things. And first, I'm going to query for the spaces, and this means I want to get all the space. So this means I have to create one more query for spaces, which should always return the array of space and the explanation sign to represent we need always the data. Save this, and this means I want to get the resolver, and resolver will return the fake DB we have. Cool, like here with the arrow sign. Now if I want the name, that's good. If I want the rent, that's also good. Everything is working. I want to add one more field in this data we have. Let's go at the top here. On both of these, I want to add a field called status, and the status for first one is available, so available, and the second one is not available. Okay, so now if I want to fetch the status, I need to add this status on the spaces type we have created. So here is a space type. I want to say status is a string, and I can get it easily. Everything is absolutely fine. Since we have the ability to get all the spaces, why not we try to actually mutate or simply create the space. When we want to create the space, we need to pass some input, and the input include rent and the name. But we now also have the status field. So let's say this name is hotel, rent per hour is, let's say, $15, and also we need the status. This means the input type we have created, the space input type, will also need the status as the string, obviously, because the status is a string. Cool. Now reload this page, and this means I now can easily able to provide the status. Here comes the issue. The problem here is we only accept two kind of status, either available or not available. But since everything is absolutely fine, I can add anything. But let's just see what we can say. This should be the status. And now if I say name, it's going to return rent and status. These three things I want to be back. Okay, so we are not creating the status. So when we create the space, we can actually, instead of doing this, we can actually spread the input. So it will always going to have this. And similarly, when we update, we can also do the spread. Oh, it's not doing this. Oh, because this is not going to have name. Now everything is fine, and now if I reload this and try to get, okay, some operation named get user, something is happening here. Let's run it. Yeah, so now you can see the problem is we can able to add any kind of a status we want, or user can send any gibberish. Now how we can prevent this and how we can restrict that, hey, we only accept these two fields? How? As the name suggests, enum is here. So we can create the enum with the very easy step. We just need to use the keyword called enum. Then we need to give the name to our enum. It could be start with a capital S or capital letter, not just S. So I can call it status types or statuses, like that. I just want to give status. You can to represent it as a enum, you can say status is just the capital letter, and here without any double quote, without single quote, without any comma, just provide your value, available and not available. Now we have defined this enum. How we can use this? So since we are mutating, we are creating the space, we have created the input space, input type for space input. Now status, we have defined it as a string. Now change it to status enum. Now let's see the real magic. Now if I refresh, first you can see it says, hey, enum status cannot represent this value. So what we can do, the real power comes here when you press Control and spacebar. Here is the thing, you can only pass either available or not available. If you are able to pass these two things, yes, it's going to provide all these things. That's so great. And this means we can also change the query. So if I try to get the spaces and I want to have the name and the status, like here you can see all is there, but I want to have the name, or I want to get the spaces which are not available. So this means I need to pass the data here. So it should be like status and not available. Lots of things to write, but enum solve this problem. So when we fetch the, where is that? Yeah, when we fetch the spaces, so we need to say, hey, I want to get the status, and what should be the type? It's not going to be the string, because we have the enum. We can say it's having a type of status as the capital letters which represent this enum status. Okay, now one more real magic is here. You can see it says, hey, it's not a valid enum. So what we can do, we can just press once again Control and spacebar to get the options for available for the status. I want to get all the spaces with the not available status. Let's modify the resolver to accept it. So I can say we accept the status, and if status is there, then I want to have the fakedb.filter where we get the space dot status is equal to the status we just passed, and otherwise just return all the fake db. Cool. So if I'm not providing anything and if I send it, yeah, I'm getting two data. So now if I say that space status not available, send it, we are just getting not available. But what if I want to have the available one, sending this, and we are getting the available one. So this is the power and real power of using enum, which minimizes your error, speed up your process, giving you the suggestions and lots of benefit. So this is enum. I hope this is going to resolve your issues, and this means now let's see the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course. So far, we have understand all the basics of GraphQL using the GraphQL JS library. Now it's time to move into the advanced thing, and we were going to use the Apollo server for our GraphQL. So let's start with the Apollo server in this episode.
Till now, we have seen various things in GraphQL, understanding the things, but now it's time to move a step ahead. So we have learned about the GraphQL JS, but GraphQL JS, if combined with Apollo server, give you great developer experience. So let's now explore the Apollo server for the GraphQL. So what you have to do, once again, the graphql.org website, if you go to code in the JavaScript, we have this Apollo server, or you can directly search for Apollo server. Okay, then here you will get the Apollo server like here. So Apollo GraphQL server, this is the thing, and you can directly click here. It's the same thing. Cool. So what do you have to do? You have to see here how actually we can start using our Apollo server in this application we already have. So basically it says for the get started part here on the left side, it says you need to install, okay, after that, yeah, you need to install Apollo server and GraphQL. So we already have this GraphQL. So if we see on our dependencies, we have Express.js, no, not Express.js, yes, we have Express.js, but we have the GraphQL as we want. So we just need to install this GraphQL server. That's very easy. npm install, I need to open new tab, npm install and Apollo server. Cool. This is installing. What next? It says you need to create a new index.js file. We have this server.js file. So for now, I'm going to create index.js file so that we can differentiate between the Apollo thing and the Express thing we have learned so far. Cool. What next? It says everything is good. Define your GraphQL schema in your index.js file. So first you need to import Apollo server and the GraphQL GQL. What is GQL? GQL is just a way to define your queries, your type, just like we did here on our server.js. We have used this build schema. So similar to this build schema, we have GQL, and the Apollo server is the real server. Okay, so let's start this and go to index.js, and first I will say const, and first I need the require. Inside this, it's Apollo server, Apollo, what's that? Yeah, server. And from here, now I want to import Apollo server, oops, not error, server, and GQL. That's right. Now, once we have this, we need to create the types. We have the type definition. So what type definition we have to create? It's gone. Yeah, here we are. So let's go. Const type defs is equal to, use this GQL and then backticks. It's very important to use backticks. And now here we can define our type of first, which is query. So what we want to query, it says you have to query for the books. So let's create a books. We are following the documentation, so you will have no issue following these steps, and this is becoming very easy for you. Now books is there, and we need to create a type for this book. So we have to create, you can also create at the bottom. So type of book, which include name as a title and the author, both are string. So title string, author string. Cool. So we have done with the type definition. Obviously, once we have the query, we need the resolver. Let's see how we can create the resolver. Okay, so this is the just the data set for the books we have, so we can include it anywhere. Maybe I can, let's have it here. Okay, next. So as I said, we need the resolver. Once again, it's very easy. You need to use the const resolver, and here you need to define it as a query. So after this type definition, we need to create the resolvers. Resolvers is equal to what resolver we are creating? We are creating resolver for query. It's very easy. So which query? Book query. So books, and what is going to return? It's going to return the array we have for this books. So just return this books, similar to like this. They have used the arrow function, no issue, everything is fine. So what next? Finally, we need to start our server. How we can start? We have to new up the Apollo server and just pass these two things, which is going to give you server, and then start your server. So I'm going to type everything so that I can easily remember what I'm doing. So server is equal to new of Apollo server, which we have already imported here. And inside this, inside an object, we need to pass the type definition, and we need to pass the resolvers. Since we are using the same name like type definition, then we don't have to define it object like key and value. But suppose I have defined it as not type definition, let's say it's types. Okay, then you need to say type definition is this types. This is also going to work. Now once you have the server, you just say server dot listen, and on the then part you will get the URL here like this, and then once you have the URL, you can just log it so that we are sure that yes, our server is running. So server is running, oops, at and plus sign URL. Obviously you can use the backticks template literal, but it's okay. Now if you use npm run dev, it's pointing, the dev is actually pointing towards the node, what is this, server.js, nodemon server.js, but it says you can you have created the index.js. So this means we need to replace it with index.js. Now nodemon will open this index.js instead of server.js. So we have, just for the learning purpose, we have defined two different things, but obviously at a time you are using any one, either Express or Apollo. So npm run dev, and it says nodemon not found. What happened? This is weird. Sometime I don't know what happened, but it says nodemon not found. I have already installed. Install nodemon, and it's a dev dependency. Okay, cool. Nodemon is done, and now if I run npm run dev with the nodemon, yes, now it says, hey, it's crashed. What happened? Let's see. It says, did you mean book with a capital B? What happened here? Okay, so it says type is different. It should be with the capital B. Okay, nice error. Everything is fine. It's opened on localhost 4000. Let's open it, and you can see it's a very nice and easy Apollo landing page. And if you don't want this page next time, you can just take it here and it will not open the next time. So I will go to the query server. It's actually the website, not a local thing. So studio.apollo server apollo graphql.com is the studio, and here we can see we are connecting to our local host. So we have opened this website, you can see is real website, like I have opened studio.apollographql.com, but it's connecting our localhost. Okay, now in our localhost, if I try to say books and I want the author of the book. And how can I execute it? So maybe running, so execute. So I think I have done some, yeah, so I zoomed it out and that just hide this query. Anyways, we get it. We can just hit this query and yes, you can see we are getting the data. If we want the author detail also, we can get it, and these things we know. But this one is more of a nice interface than the previous one, GraphQL, we have seen. So result is like here, query is there, and the documentation is here. You can check each and everything like this, shorthand like here. You can include the things directly from here if you don't want to write it like this. So this is a nice way, and this is the simplest way to get started with Apollo GraphQL server. Now let's move with Apollo GraphQL in our GraphQL journey. So move to the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course. Now we have the Apollo server running, but there is a little different way of writing the query and the resolvers and creating servers as we have already seen. But let's see how we can actually understand the schema writing in Apollo server in GraphQL in this episode.
Once you have the Apollo server ready, now it's time to understand the schema and how it's different, or not actually different, but how you can use the schema, write the schema in Apollo server. So we have the server. We are currently using this book query given by the documentation. But now I have one more thing. I have this JSON file which include some of the Harry Potter characters and their descriptions. So let's work on this and see how we can move into the index.js into this Apollo, and we can remove this books because we are not going to use books. We need this JSON data. So how we can get it? So it's very easy. We just need to say const and the data. So all these things are characters, so why not call characters. Okay, now we have this, and let's make it capital C, and then require it's on the same directory with the Harry Potter. So maybe I can write it. It's not giving. So like this. Yeah, got it. Cool. Now we have this queries. So we have one type and then query. So first we need to query for the character. So character with a small c, and it should be having type of character. So first we need to create a type called character. So once again character, and now let's open the JSON file to see what are the fields we need for each character. It should be ID, name, gender, DOB. So let's call it ID, and it should be ID and with the capital D, then name, and I'm going to fill every other thing. So let's just break it. So till now I have added all these fields, and if you see actually the characters, each character has this wand. Wand is having description, like it's the wood, holy, core is phoenix, feather, how many length is 11. Now this is itself an object. So what we can give the wand as a type? This means we need to create another, you can say, type for this wand. So at just above, I'm going to say type, and let's call it wand, and this wand include wood, core, and length. So everyone is having wood, core, and length. Cool. So wood is a string, then core, not code, core is once again a string, and length is going to be the integer. Okay, that's fine, but we are having some issue here. This is because we need to now use this wand, the type we have created, as a type here. Now if we save it, it will going to format it. Yes, this is good. So we have this character which include everything. Wand is a different object, so we have created another type for it, and we have it. Cool. Now when we are trying to get or query the characters, we need to make sure that it always include something, some array. It could be empty, but when we query for book, it should always give the book. But what book? We have the character. So we are getting the character now. Now, on the resolver, we can see we have the books for the resolver, but we need the resolver for our query, which is characters. So let's say characters, and this include all the characters with a capital C we have here. So let's say characters. Okay, if you have confusion between this character and the type character, you can call this one as characters data, like this. So with a capital C, it's a type, with a small c is a query, and character data is character data. Everything else is fine. And if you see our server is having some issue, let's rerun it, and it says that here it's already in use. So I have already running server, a lot of server I have created. So let's close this one, npm run dev one more time, and now it's working. Let's go here and reload this page. Once you reload this page, you will see the documentation on the left side, which is here. It's for the characters now, not for the book. So we can just remove this books from here, and then we can choose the fields directly from here. So I want the characters, cool, but in the character I want the name of the characters only. So let's query it, and boom, you can see all the characters are here. This is really great. But remember, we have created another type for the vand, and how we can query for the vand. So if I say vand, and you can see it's now ticked. If I try to query here, it says, hey, you're trying to get the vand, but what exactly you want for the vand? So field vand of the type vand must have the selection of subfield. That's absolutely important. So for the subfield, I can show you, like here, if you go, you can see now this vand include three things: word, core, and length. So let's say the word. So I need to click on plus sign, or you can directly write it. So I can just say here word here, and now if we query it, yes, you can see each character is having the vand and the vand details. So holy, vand, willow, and hawthorn, and ash. So this is absolutely amazing. Now let's try to get the length, because we are going to have some issue here. So if I get the length, you can see now we are having this error. It says, hey, cannot have a non-integer value, because we said that length is an integer. So what we can do here, we can see this one, Hermione, is not having the length here in our database. Maybe it should be, I don't know. So what we can do, we can make it null. So if we make it null, then once again running, now it says, hey, that's okay, but it should not have a non-integer value. So someone is having non-integer value. So yeah, so Cedric is having 12.25. So I can make it 12, or we can just convert this int to float. Okay, now let's try this. And yeah, you can see now it's working. So this is very important to understand, that if your data can be nullable, that's fine. But if you are sure that it's never going to be null, then you can make this exclamation mark, which is ensuring that it's always going to have the data. If it's not having any data, it's going to give error. So yes, that's fine. But if I make it length as non-nullable, you can see it says, oops, not this one. It says cannot return null for non-nullable field. So that's great. Now, one more thing I can see is every character is having a gender field, male, or either male or female. And we have said that the gender is a string, but it could be a enum value, because enum can include just male or female, because we have the data for these two genders only. Cool. So let's create the enum for gender. So I generally call with all capital letters, and then I say male, female. Okay, then I define this gender as not as a string but as capital letter gender, which is representing the enums. Now if I reload this server, you can see now the definition is saying that gender is a enum value gender, which include two things like either male or female. So let's include the gender also. So I want the gender, and obviously it include either male or the female. So what if we say some other gender? So I don't know, but ABCD. So what about that? If we run it, you can see now it's giving the error that, hey, gender should be either male or female. What is ABCD? I don't understand. So this is making your query more readable. So I think this is really great, because when we connect with the database, we need to have the gender field for the enums. Cool. Let's move to the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course. Whenever we are working on a real project, it's not good to have everything in a single file. So how we can actually extract things in GraphQL inside this Apollo server in this episode.
As our application grows, we need to extract the information into dedicated file. We are doing everything in single file. This is not a good thing. So first we can see we have this types. So we can extract this into a dedicated file, and let's call it schema, or maybe just types only. So types.js. Okay. And here what we need to do, we need to first cut all these things from here and paste it. Then I can say module.exports and exporting the types. Okay. And module.export is types. Cool. But we need this GQL, which comes from Apollo, and we can just say like this. So this is done and we are exporting it. So what we can do, we can import it here. So const types is equal to require, and in the require part I can just move to the types. Cool. So we have the types and we are passing it here. Similarly, let's move to the resolvers. So let's create a new file called resolvers.js. Same thing here we need to do. Let's cut, paste it, and I say module.exports is equal to resolvers. Everything is fine, and let's import just like here. Resolvers is equal to not that require and resolvers. So see, our index.js is only responsible for getting the type, resolvers, and starting the server or creating the server. And one more thing, we need to move this into our resolvers. So let's open the resolver, and here we are. One mistake I have done, and it's not a mistake, it's just a typo kind of thing. You can see we are querying for the character. If we go to the types, we have the characters, which is a collection of characters. It's not characters, it's just a single character. That then only we can say that it's an array or collection of character. So let's rename this type to character. Everything is working fine, and this will come if our server is running and if we will be able to query the things. So we have the query, we have a character, we want name, gender, and DOB, date of birth, and cool. And let's get the wand, wood, and core, and we can have it. Absolutely fine. And now let's move to the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL. Here with the Apollo server, we can understand a very nice feature of GraphQL called the interfaces. What is interface? How we can write them, and how actually we use, that is very important, how we use the interface, everything in this episode.
To understand the interfaces, we have here two new, you can say, entries. So here we have this goblin as the species and dragon as the species. So this means if any character is having the species field, it's not a human. And if any character is not having a species field, that means that character is a human. So this is the differentiation. Okay, let's move to the index.js. Now we have this types. So let's open the types. Now what we are doing here, everything is inside the character. So if we try to get the gender for any, not gender actually, I want the species, you can see I'm not able to do that. So you will say that, hey Sarthak, just add one more thing, species, which is going to be the string. And if it is, since it is a non-nullable field, so if someone is not having it, and that's okay. Cool. This is a very straightforward solution, but there is a very nice solution by using the interface, which can not just make your code readable, make your query very, very efficient and also readable. So how we can do this? Let's start. So first we need to make sure that this character is going to be a, you can say, interface. I forgot sometime. Interface. So I'm going to create an interface. So I'm going to name it character, and then you will say, hey, there will be clashing in the name. Okay, so in that case, I'm just going to turn this to human. Okay, so every human has ID, name, gender, date of birth, actor, and image, vand, but not species. Okay, because if there is a species, that means it's a non-human. So what is the interface? Interface is just a object, obviously, and it defines what fields you must have when you create the type. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get ID, name, and character, ID, name, and gender, sorry, not character, inside this interface of character. Why just three things? Let's see. So if we go to the data we have, where is this? Inside the JSON, every character is having a name, ID, and gender. So even if that character is a non-human, that character is having ID, name, and gender. That's why I have moved the common three things into an interface called character. So this means if it is a character, it must have ID, name, and gender. Now, what I'm going to do with this interface, I'm going to say that, hey, I want this to implements character. Now, what is the power of this? Now, suppose I have not defined gender here. That's not an issue in this case. And if we go to the server, like not here, we can see we have some issue. What that issue is, and we can see character.gender expected, but human does not provided it. What's that mean? That means this interface is enforcing the developer, enforcing our code to have some specific field when we are creating the type. This is the power of the interface. This is the one power of interface. So if I get the gender back, and if we see the server, no error, that means we will easily able to query, and obviously we have not done with the species. So everything is fine. Now it's not actually fine, but we will solve this later. So we have created one for human. Now, why we are having this error? It says that abstract type character must resolve to an object. What that mean? It says that you're trying to get the character, and each characters is a collection of character, but character here is now not a type. Character is an interface. So it says that it's not a object, it's not a type, so that I can resolve. This means I need to change this to, let's say, humans actually, which include the human type. So we are having the human type now. If we are having the human as a type, then we need to go to the resolver, and here we need to make sure we are giving the humans And when we say to the character.data, we just filter, and I say CHA for character short form, and character dot species. If it is not present, then we are saying that character is a human. Simple. Everything is moving fine, and now we are not able to directly call for character. Remove it. I can call for humans. Now that's fine. What about the non-humans? So just like human, I can create another type for non-human. But one more time, since this non-human is also a character, so I am going to implement character interface, and I need to have these three things. So make sure ID is always available. So for that, I'm going to say like exclamation mark. Cool. Now, since we have the non-human, let's create the query for non-humans, and which is going to be a collection of non-human type. Important, not null, not null. Similar to this, we need to create the resolver for this. Go back and just like this, non-humans, and where we have so I can use the double exclamation mark. That means if it is present, then only filter and give me that non-human. Now if I see, we have another field, and we can query for non-human, and I can query for gender and name. Cool. And see, non-human is also there. So let's have the recap why we need the interface. Because interface enforces our code to have certain fields exactly we have written in the interface, which is going to help us writing the code. But this is not just the only you can say use of interface. What is the actual use of interface? We're going to see in the next episode. So let's see the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to GraphQL course. With the interface, yes, we are enforcing the developer to have a certain structure in your type. But there is one important thing. We have to define the resolver type. What is resolver type? As the name suggests, it's a resolver and the type. How we can resolve the type when we query for an interface? Confusing? No, because I'm going to explain everything in this episode.
Interface allow us to enforce our code to must include some of the fields in our type. But by doing this, actually we are having a safe side when we are creating any type. We know that what are the fields we need to include in this type. Okay, so this is a single, or you can say normal use of interface. But now we are going to see the actual use case of interface. So for now, we are just querying for human and non-human. We have the resolver for human and non-human. Now, I also want to have all the characters at a single query. I don't want to query for different types like human and non-human. How I can do that? Now I'm getting back the character. This is going to be interesting, because in the last episode I said that we cannot query for the character, but yes, we can query for the character. So is that I said wrong? No, you cannot directly query. So see, what is the thing? Let's see. We have created a query. We said that, hey, this character query is going to be a collection of character. But character is not a type, it's a interface. And this means any type which implement character can be queried through this character query. So this is great. Once again, I'm saying any type which implement the character interface can be queried in this single query, character. This means if I try to fetch, let's clean this up and let's go to the queries. Now we have three things: humans, non-humans, and characters. Should be characters like this. And yeah, so now I can easily implement, you see, I can easily get the name and the gender. So if I get the name and the gender, we have the error. Cool. So let's first see, cannot return null from a non-nullable field. From our previous experience, it looked like because we don't have the resolver for it. So is that true? Let's create the resolver. So I'm going to create a resolver for the character, and since it can have all the characters, I don't have to do any filtering. I just return the character, and let's see, is it going to work or not. Run it, and now it says another thing. It says, hey, abstract type character must resolve to an object. We are back on the same error. So what exactly this mean? It says that either the character type should provide a resolve type function, and each possible type should be providing. What that mean and how we can solve it. If you're not sure and if you're having difficulty understanding, you can go to the schema, to the documentation of Apollo server, and here you can see resolving an interface. When you're resolving an interface, you just need to create the resolver, and how you can create, just have the interface name, then resolve type as a function name, where you get these things, and then you return the type. Not sure? Let's see how we can be sure about that. Cool. So here, when we are querying, when we create the resolver for query, I can create another resolver for character, and we know character is a interface. Here I'm going to create __ resolve type. Okay, this will give me the character which I am searching, or I'm querying, actually not searching. Then it's going to give me the context, and third thing, it's going to give me the info or information. Okay, now what we have to do, we need to define that if character include character dot species is there, that means we are querying for which type? We are querying for non-human type, and this string should be exactly same of the type you have created, this one. Okay, so if we are searching for species, that means we are searching for non-human. If we are not searching, I can say if we are not searching for character dot species, this means we are going to query for human, and if both of the case not there, that means return null. Okay, so this is the thing which is very simple to understand. Okay, everything is fine. Is this going to resolve? Let's see. Yes, it's resolving, but what it is doing with all these resolve type? This scenario comes when you go and get something which is only on one type. So a non-human can have the not just ID, name and gender, it can also have the species. So let's add non-human as one more field called species, which is going to be the string. This means you can see it should update it very soon. Yeah, now if we try to get the species, how we can get 3 dot, and we define it, and we say on which type? Non-human type, and in this non-human I want the species. So if I search it, you can see this character is a human, so there is no field called species. It's not even saying null, nothing. But when we are getting on that part, how I can zoom it? Yeah, so when we are getting for the non-human part, you can see species is there. Okay, so let's zoom out, it's difficult. Yeah, so species are here. Similar to this, if we can get the date of birth, because non-human doesn't have the date of birth because they didn't give birth. So human is having the date of birth field, but non-human does not have. So this is the real power of interface, is you can extract the things, and when we are searching something related to some specific type, we can get that field on that object or that result only. So this is one more time I'm going to explain you. So we are searching for characters. Character is a collection of character, but since character is a interface, so what we are going to do, we are going to create the resolver. Just like we do the query, we do the resolver, but we name the resolver as the interface name. Inside that, we define the resolve type as the function, and then whenever whatever our logic is, according to that logic, we just return the real type it should have. So this is how resolving the type. So this is actually super descriptive name. We are resolving the type for this character. I hope now you get the idea what is interface and how we can use and resolve the interface. Cool. So let's now move to the next big thing in GraphQL.
Welcome to the GraphQL course. In this episode, we are going to create a resolver for the type inside of the type. So if we have a human type and human has another type called food they like, so how we can go on that? So this means we need to create a chain of resolvers. So let's understand the chain resolvers in this episode for GraphQL.
Let's learn about the resolver chaining in the Apollo GraphQL server. So what's happening here, I have done something. I removed all the van detail for each character on Harry Potter. So you can see now every character doesn't have any van. So where the van goes? Every van is now inside this DB directory with this JSON file, and every van is now connected to the character using this character ID. It's similar to the database structuring we have. So we don't want to fill the data with every other thing. So what we are doing, we are just removing and keeping all the character detail, and the van detail is here. So character 1 is Harry Potter. So you can see Harry Potter has 1. So this means Harry Potter van wood is holy and core is phoenix, length is 11. Cool. Before moving forward, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move this also into the DB, because this is the kind of DB we have created. And since we have moved the Harry Potter here inside DB directory, we need to go to the resolvers where we are using this. We just need to say db/Harry Potter. Okay, so how we can see what this affected? Since we have moved the van into different file, when we query for the van here, so let's see here, if we query, you can see van is null. Why? Because the collection, the primary collection we are looking here doesn't have any van field. So if we go to the resolver is for the human. We are searching for the human. Human says give me the character, and in this character data we don't have the van. Now how we can tell our GraphQL that, hey, whenever I'm asking for the van, you need to look into this vans.json data. So let's see the real magic. Remember, we have created a resolver for the interface we have created. Similar to the interface, we can also create the resolver for the type we have. We have human type, non-human type. So since we are searching for the human type, let's see how we can create a resolver for human, because human is having van, and if we can get the power to modify this thing, we are good to go. Let's see. So this is the primary query of humans with the S, humans. It returns a collection or a list of each human. So we can resolve, we can tell to the GraphQL that how you can resolve this human type, not the query. Query is humans. We are going to create the human resolver. Okay. Now in this human resolver, which is the thing we need to modify. So let's make it very simple. Let's modify the name field. So I have the name field, and whenever you are asking for the name field, return Sarthak. It doesn't matter whatever the data I'm getting. Whenever you resolve for human, name should be Sarthak. Query and see, every name is now Sarthak. This means we can modify the Vand also. Cool. So let's rename it to Vand. Here we cannot return a string. Let's see what's going to happen when we try it. It says you cannot return a string. It should be Vand type, and we have the Vand type, which is here, and Vand returns wood, core, and length. Cool. This means I can say like wood and core is something and length is, let's say, 12. Now since we are hard coding this thing, it should be overwritten for every like data, regardless of the data we are getting. Now run this query. See, every character Vand is having the exact same data. Now our job is to know which character we have and get the Vand detail from the JSON file we have here. So how we can do that? First we need to know, somehow we need to know which character we are resolving here inside. How we can know? Now GraphQL or Apollo GraphQL especially provide you first the parent query. So query, when we query for humans, it's a parent one, it's a root one. So if we check for the parent here, parent, log it and run the query. See, it's undefined because it's root. It doesn't have any upper query. This is the starting of the query. But if we log this query here, we should see the query above it, and above human is a humans, because this is actually giving all the collection or list of human. Now when I run it, you can see every time it goes to this part, it has the character detail. So we can grab the ID and then we can filter out the data we are having on the Vands. So first let's import, and I call it Vands is equal to require from db/Vands. Now since we have the Vands and Vands include the character ID, and we have the character real ID, we can easily match it. How? Let's see. So here we are going to do one thing which is called Vands.filter, and filtering out I can say item, and the item.character ID is equal to parent.id. Okay, now this is going to be interesting, because if we run it, it's still giving the error. Why? Because every time we give this, filter actually return you the array. So you can do the find also. Let's try. Yeah, you can see now Harry Potter is Holy Phoenix 11, Hermione is Wind Dragon and Null, like these kind of things. Cool. So in this way we have used the power of parent, and you can say resolver chains. How resolver chains? Because it starts from human, this is the one resolver, and humans is the resolver, and then every human type resolver. We can go one step ahead. Every time we resolve for Vand, we can return something else. So we can say we need the Vand type resolver. So this is with a capital letter is a type. Okay, so now I want to say that if I'm searching for wood inside Vand, let's return ABCD. Okay, so I have some issue, and issue is I need to use it like this. Okay, now regardless of whatever Vand we are returning from here, we are going to return ABCD. This means every character will have would value as ABCD, not would. Wand would is ABCD. Okay, but as I said, it's a chain. So what we are passing, what we are getting in this would, we are getting the parent, which is the parent for would. The wand query, where is the wand query? Here is the wand query. So whatever we get here, we get for the parent as here. This means we can simply say, give me the parent dot would. Cool. And it will be back to the same thing. Yep. Now see, length here is 11, here is null. What if I say -1? It's null, or maybe -1, or maybe 0. Okay, length null is 0. So we need to modify this thing. So length here, return parent dot length, but if it is there, that's fine, otherwise return 0. So this is cool. So I'm going to remove would because it doesn't matter, we are doing the same thing. Now run this server, and yeah, you can see it's now modified to 0 instead of null. So this is the power of using resolver chains in Apollo GraphQL server. So let's move to the next big thing in GraphQL. Welcome to the GraphQL course. We know that when we create the resolver, we can get the parent. That means if any resolver or anything comes before that resolver, we can get that. But for the query, we are not getting the parent because it's the basic query type. So not just the parent thing is there inside the parameter, we have some more resolver parameter. So let's understand the resolver parameters in this episode. You know, we have seen this parent, and parent is actually the argument in our resolver, but this is not the only one resolver argument we have. Let's talk about the more resolvers here, which is the second one we can call is arguments. So arguments is like anything we send. So to explain these things, let's start with the very basic. So I want to search what's happened. Okay, so let's go to the type and create a new query, and I want to search for single human. Okay, so let's search for human. It's going to return me the human. Okay, so let's create a resolver for human, and this is a query human. Don't confuse with the type human. Type is with a capital H, query with a small h. Okay, and to get a single user, we need to know the ID. Previously, we directly had the ID, but you know, the Apollo GraphQL server provide the parent as the first argument. So we need to skip this. So to skip it, I use underscore so that it's just a representation that this one I'm not using. Now, next is arguments. Okay, so since we need to get the ID, we need to tell our query that, hey, whenever we are searching, we are doing the query, I need the ID, and ID should be integer and it's required. Okay, next, so for now just log arguments and see what we are getting. So npm run server and go here while it's started, and now if I search, oops, I need to search for single human. So here is the human, and now it says human ID. So instead of doing something like this, sometimes it's complex, but let's have it. So human ID, it says 1, and we know all these things from our previous experience. And give me the name, query, and it's not, since we are not returning anything, but we are getting the ID. This is really cool. What this means, we can actually destructure it as like ID, and then we can simply say character data dot find where character is character dot id equal to the id we are passing. Okay, that's cool. This means if I query, yeah, we are getting the first. If we query for second, we are getting Hermione. If we are getting the 44, it's returning nothing. So we need to modify it. We need to say that if we have it, return it, otherwise give null. Okay, let's try this. Okay, so it says non-nullable. But it could be nullable, so I need to modify my query, and it should be like, if it is not there, give me null thing, so I don't have to provide it. Let's see. Yeah, so human is not available for the ID of 44, but with the ID of 4 it's available. This is the second argument. Yes, it has a lot of argument. So let's learn about them in next episode, and we will see the next big thing in GraphQL. Welcome to the GraphQL course. We know that in a resolver we have many parameters like parent, and then we have a context. But the context is really useful, and it is very essential when creating the bigger application using GraphQL. So now let's see what is resolver context in GraphQL in this episode. So once again, I'm going to log this to see what exactly we have right now. So when we do this, okay, so let's run the query and see the log. Context is empty for now, but what is the use of context and what it is? So context is actually an object. See, this is an object. By using this, you can share your data across all the resolvers. So suppose, just like if you have authentication detail, you need that detail on every resolver everywhere. So how we can instead of getting that logged in user information, authentication tokens, like that things in every resolver, you can actually move that thing in the context. But how we can move that in the context? For that, we need to go into the types, actually into the index. Here you can see we are passing the type definition, we are passing the resolver. Along with these two things, we can also pass the context as a third argument. Okay, but we don't have context, so let's create the context. Okay, and why not create another file for the context, context.js. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to just say what I am doing here. I'm having okay, so module export. Cool. So I say const context is equal to an object as it says, and then module.exports is equal to context. Now here I'm saying is logged in as true. I'm passing it. Let's import it. So context require from same directory as context. Okay, so we have imported it and we have passed it here as a context. Now what I'm going to do, I will go to once again on the resolver, and we are already having the context. This means if I now hit the query, you can see this information is readily available here because of the Apollo server context. Cool. So what next we can do with the context? See, we are actually having this this two data here. It's not good to have the data inside the resolver. So what I can do, I can cut that from there. Then I can go to the context and I'm importing them. And now I say characters. Characters is equal to, I can rename it once again to characters like this. And since it's having the same name, I don't have to provide key and value. Cool. This is amazing, because now one more time, if we go to the resolver, now things are going to break, because here if we can see character data is not available, we have moved it somewhere else, but we can run it. Yes, we are getting error, but on this console we can see we have all the data readily available. So we can directly fetch the character characters from here and then find that one here. Run the query, and yeah, we are having it. So everywhere, wherever we are using this character as a character data, we can just say underscore, then double underscore, because it should not be same. So next is character, and passing this character as the thing here. What's that? Don't save. What happened? Where is the resolver? Yeah, so it's character data for human. It's underscore. I did something bad. Something is wrong here. No, it's not. Nothing is wrong. Go and do the things. Underscore and destructuring. Cool. But see, here we have the vand. So once again, it's all same. So we can say here, and I need the vand instead of vands instead of character now. And yeah, so that's done actually. Cool. So everything is fine now. See, can we do this? Yes. Can we get the van detail for human we are sending? Yes, we are getting it. Can we get just the characters instead of this? So I can remove the human. I just want the character, name, gender on non-human. No, I need on the humans, name and gender. I remove this. Character is not defined, so on the characters. Okay, here we have like this. It should now work. And yeah, you can see everything is working absolutely fine. So this is the power of context, and this is the way you can actually pass anything to your Apollo server. Cool. Let's now move to the next big thing in GraphQL. Welcome to the GraphQL course. Now, with the Apollo server, we have seen how we can query something. But how about actually creating, deleting, or updating something? That means the mutation. So let's understand the Apollo mutation in this episode. And now let's work on the mutation. And it's going to be very easy for us because we already know the real things. We just need to implement this in Apollo GraphQL. So let's create the type of mutation, and it should be mutation like this. And then what mutation we can create? Obviously, we need to create a new character in the Harry Potter list. So let's say create character. Okay. And first, since this is a mutation, it needs some input data. So we can say input, or we can call it data, anything. Let's call it data. And we need to define the input, or maybe I can say create input. And once done, it's going to return the human. Okay. Now, this is important to send the input data. And since we have this, we need to create the create input, and it's going to be the input type, as we already know from our previous experience. So when we are creating the new character, what we need name, gender, DOB, actor, and image. We are not creating vand right now, and we will give the ID by default. So let's grab all these things, put it here. Now the thing is, to create a new character, all these fields has to be non-nullable, important. Okay. Now what next? Since we have created this mutation, if we go to the Explorer, and you can see now we have a mutation field here. We can create the mutation, and finally we can get the name. So here you can see, when we go here on the mutation, we are sending the data, which should be the create input type. And since it's a variable, we can pass the variable from here, and it should have first the name. Name is, let's say, new character. Next, it should have the date of birth. So I say DOB just, and then it should have the actor name. So new actor, and what's that, image and gender. So gender is going to be, let's say, male for now, and it's giving error. It says, hey, it should be acceptable in the gender enum we have created, which is somewhere here. So it should be with a small m, not a capital M. This is the power of enum actually. So here we say male, and now finally we need the image and image URL. Okay, so this is done, and since we have added this gender as a type of enum gender, that's why we get that warning. Now if we run the mutation, it will say nothing because there is no resolver for this mutation. Let's now create it. So since we have done with this, let's go to the resolvers, and just like we have created for query resolvers, we need to create one for mutation. So now here we just need to give the keyword as mutation, and here let's work on create character. And just like we saw here on the query, we get first as the parent, second as the argument, third as the context, and fourth as the info. Okay, so first we don't need any parent, but yes, we need the argument. So input fields we need, so I just call it data for now, and similar to this we can grab the characters. Now let's log this data and see exactly what we are getting. So when we send this, okay, nothing happened. Oh yeah, we are getting this data, you can see. Now I can directly you can say, what's this, destructure the data we are sending. So now one more time, if I run this query, you can see we have this object with all the details we are sending from here. Cool. Now what we need to do, we need to add a new ID. So how we can add? For now it's very easy. Data is going to be the spread of data, but I also add ID as characters dot length plus 1. So if we have 3 characters, so the new we are going to add should be having the ID of plus 1, which is 4. Okay, what next? We just need to say characters dot push, and pushing this data. And finally, since it need in the return as a human, we need to return the characters, and we can actually return the data directly. Okay, that's good, but we have some error here. It says data already been declared. Okay, so we don't need to use const here because we are just overriding the data we are getting here, and this should be fine. Cool. Now if I hit it, you can see now we have the new car. Okay, so I'm going to remove this, and let's try to get the character. So I'm going to run a query to get let's say a character, and with the ID, just want the ID. Let's do the query here, and 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Now we have the 8th one also. And in our database, do we have the 8 or 7? We have 7. So the new one we have created is 8th one. We can actually see the name, and name is new char. Okay, so this is how we can actually work or create some data using the mutation in Apollo GraphQL server. Let's move to the next big thing in GraphQL. Welcome to the GraphQL course. In a real application, we will always use a database as a source of truth for our data.
Now, let's understand how we can connect a SQLite data in GraphQL, actually in Apollo server GraphQL. Everything in this episode.
It's now time to move from our dummy data to a real database. Okay, so first what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually create, so I say touch db.sqlite, and I think sqlite, yeah, okay, so db.sqlite. Yeah, so we have this SQLite database, and before moving forward, we need to actually install the npm library for first, obviously, SQLite 3, but along with that, to serialize and unserialize, creating the model, all these things, we need to install one more package called sqlize actually. So second is sqlize CLI. Okay, so installing these two packages will give us very nice ability to have the models, the migrations, and doing lots of other things, and that will be done with the CLI. Okay, so everything is now installed. What next we have to do? We have to go to the sqlite CLI, but it's not available. If we run the sqlite, it says command not found, because that is actually inside the node modules folder. So we need to go to our node modules. So I can say node module like this. Inside that, go to the dot bin, and oops, I don't want to restart. So node modules bin slash sqlite. So sqlite, what's that? Now after that, I just need to say init. Okay, so what this is actually doing, you can see it has created a configuration file where we have the configuration. So root is the username, password is null, db is database development, all these things, and test database, so development database, production database, all these things. Okay, next we have this models. So we have just index model where we have a lot of thing here, so let's not go inside that. Next we can see we have this migration directory and seeder directory. So migration directory is where we have the files which hold the structure of our database, our tables. Okay, but if you go once again to the configuration, since we are in the development mode, we are not using MySQL, we are using SQLite. So the point is how we can connect the SQLite. For that, let's search for npm sqlite, and we get it. Let's open it, and here you can see we have the documentation for version 6. Obviously we are using the latest version. If you are not sure, you can check on the package json. So yeah, sqlite 6 version. Cool. So here on the getting started connecting to database, you can see if you're using the SQLite, you need to make sure you use the dialect as SQLite and the storage path where you have your database. So here inside this, let's turn to SQLite. So how we can call it SQLite. Sometimes I forgot like how we can call the SQLite. So SQLite, it's okay. Then we just need the storage. So storage is very simple. It's on the same db.sqlite, which is this one. Okay, this is done, and configuration is completed. What next? Now, since we have done, we need to create a new model. Okay, we are not going to use the existing model. So one more time, we can say these things, but this time if we can get the help, we can see we have a lot of options, but what we need to create. So a model generate, we need to do this model generate part. Okay, so model generate or model create, 1 second. Okay, let's see. So it should be like this, model generate, and we can pass the name And once again, if you are not sure, you can get the help like this. So you can see we can pass here the name like here. Cool. One more time. Name is let's say character. Okay, then comes the attribute part. What are the field it required? Attributes. So attributes is obviously name as string. Okay, let me open this harrypotter.json so that I can see. First name, then gender. So gender is again string. Then we have date of birth as string, and let's see, actor. One more time, string. Everything is a string. This is done. Okay, so finally we can hit enter, and missing attribute. Oops, it should be attributes. Attributes, is it correct? attributes. What happened? So I need to use double hyphen sign. Okay, that's done. And now it says argument double comma is somewhere. Okay, so we have I think we don't need this kind of space. That's why it's asking for this. Date of birth, and then we have a space like here. Oh, a lot of things. So finally we have done, and we have created the migration. So a model, and model is there. You can see this is the model. When we create it, it actually define these fields. And okay, so migration is also there. For that, it will already have the ID field and some of other fields. Updated at and deleted at, updated at and created at is already there. Cool. So in the next video, we will go and see how actually we can work on our model. Welcome to the GraphQL course. Till now, we have seen how we can connect the database, but it's now time to create the table. And to create the table, we need the migration and how we can write the query to fetch the data from the SQLite database. Let's understand these things in this episode. So in the last episode, we have created the migration model and lots of things. And I have to actually migrate it. And what is the meaning of migrate? That means whatever the migration we have defined, whatever the table structure we have defined, we have to use this structure and create the table inside the db.sqlite. But before that, before moving to that thing, I just want to show you how actually we are going to use this models we have created here. So, you know, we have this context, and we are passing this character and vand from our hard-coded JSON data we have here. But we don't want these things. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to import models, and this is actually going to import everything from the models directory. And instead of this, I just pass the models as the context. And now, since we already have the context connected to our where is the index, to our Apollo server like this. Yeah, this means this models we have added in the context will be available on every resolver. Go to the resolver, and here we are querying for human. Now this context doesn't have any character, so this means if I go here and let's do the query for human, name and gender, and it's going to give us error. It says there is no property for this character, and somehow I cannot filter. So this means I need to get the models from here. And now how we can do the getting all things? First we need to define which model we are talking about. So we are talking about the character model, and inside that I want to get everything. If you don't know how you can do that, once again, this is the sequelizer package documentation, and here we can go to the query basic, and here we have this applying not where selecting query. So here we have this find all. So just need to say find all, and that's it. So if I go one more time and try to hit the humans, it says cannot read the property undefined of one more time it says undefined. Why is that? Character. So character, this is fine. Let's debug this by consoling this model, console log on the model, hit the query. We should see we have this. And what about character dot character? If I do that, hit it. Okay, so now it says undefined because of some error. And the error is, if you go here, the file name is yes with a small c, but the class name is with capital C. So we need to make sure we are using the capital C. So let's say capital C, and now one more time, if we hit it, you can see it says no such table. This is the thing I was talking about initially. We need to migrate the database. So one more time, if we go here and check all the commands we have this db migrate, this one. This is actually allowing us to have all the migration, that means the structure of table into the database we have. So if I run it, it's now here. That's cool. Now if I run, you can see it says empty because our database is really empty. But what if I try to get the non-human detail? So if I say I want non-human species. Now if I do this once again on the non-human query, I need to make sure. And instead of this, why don't we directly send the model instead of like the real model thing? So I just spread it so that we directly catch or destructure from here, so that we don't have to say model dot the model name. So if I one more time get back to the human to really check, yeah, this is working. Get back to the non-human, and I want the species also, so it will going to give the error. That's cool. Now find it with non-human, and here filter where species does not exist. But this filter doesn't going to be working here because it's a SQL query now. So you will see filter does not exist, and now we need to find where this species is not available, or I can say is null. So we have defined that if someone is having the species, that means it's non-human. Okay, so what we have to do, we have to go to the where clause, and where we need to find the null thing. So yeah, here it is. So we just need to say where, and then some attribute, and then what will should be. So op is the operator we need to import from serialize. Cool. So here we need to say where, and actually find all. Is it find all or find single? Anyways, we will see. First let's call this where, and inside where we need to say op, that means operation dot equal to null, where this is not null actually. How about not null? Is null. So is not, maybe there should be is not, or maybe I can say like this is not null. Is this going to work? Let's see. It's not in, there is not in, but where is not null? Not equal to null. Maybe this should be the case. We will see this. So no such character dot false. So what happened here, it says no such column. This means the column is we need to define, which is species, and then it should be like here. Cool. One more time. Yeah, invalid value, false, null. So maybe I can say not equal to null. What about this? Now it's again saying the real thing. No such columns character dot species. When we had created the migration, we don't have the column for species. Let's now add it, species, and it's going to be allow null, first very important thing, which is going to be true, and then type is going to be the string. So I can copy. Next, the point is, first, if we try to migrate one more time, it says no new migration because the migration is already migrated, is used. So we need to roll back. So how we can roll back? So here is the thing called undo all. Okay, so I can simply say db undo all. So it's removing all the migration. This means if I run it, it says no such table. This means one more time we need to migrate it. And this time it will include the species. And now we are getting human, non-human, null, and everything is there. So this is the way we can actually use our model everywhere inside this resolvers using the context, and we can query for find all and all these things. So let's quickly do the same thing here for this character. And now I need to say where condition one more time to get the single one. So where with the id, find all, everywhere is find all. So insert or select find all attributes. So it's a selection of this where operator basic. So simply we can write something like this. So it's again find all. Inside this we need to define the where condition. Inside where condition we need to define the id should be the given id, like this. Okay, so this should be the case. And if we try to fetch a single human with the variable of id of 1, and I need the name of that person, so it says null because obviously our database is empty. So this is the way we are moving towards every other thing. So we can just say dot find all, since it is all the characters. And now it's time to create the characters and see whether these query really working or not. Let's move to the next big thing in GraphQL. Welcome to the GraphQL course. We are reaching the end of this course, but in this episode, we are going to write the mutation query for updating something inside the database. And that's really incredible because this is the thing you really need in a real application. Everything in this episode. We have created a lot of changes here, and we have moved from hard-coded data to the data in our database. And we have this model which is passing through the context we have created here, like this. And now it's time to see whether these are really working by creating the new character. Okay, so what we have to do next, we have to do the mutation, actually mutation of create character, and we need to pass everything. So how we can pass everything? First, one more time, if I go back, yeah, so we need to pass the data, and then I return everything like here, but not about vand, because vand is not there in our. Do we have the vand? Let's see the migration. I believe not. Okay, for now we are leaving the vand. Okay, so in the data, first we need the name, and let's copy from the really characters we have. So why don't we just copy like this and paste it? Everything is there. So it's time to really check how it is working. So here we are doing the old way. So run it, we should get the error variable data got invalid id. So id is not required. Cool. One more time. Now it says cannot read the property undefined of length. One more time. It says, hey, character is not there. So we know character is now as a character model. Okay. So what should be the id? So id will be character dot, we need to count. So how we can actually count? One more time, search here. So let's search for count. Yeah, here it is. So we need to say await. Why is await? Is this direct thing? So let's see. So okay, we just say count, nothing else. So character dot count is going to be the query, going to be the id. So if there is 0, so id will be +1, like this. So here we just need to say this is the id, and data is whatever data we are passing becomes the final data including the id. And then we can say character dot, now we need to create, search for create. So it says user.create and passing all the data. Similarly, character.create passing all the data. And let's call it await. This means it should be a sync. Okay. And let's do await here also. And finally, it's returning the new data. So we can say const, or we can directly return this. Finally, let's try this. So hit it, and cool, you can see we have this. This means since we have the first data, why don't we add one more data for Hermione? So let's copy this and paste it here. And as usual, we don't need this id. One more time, id is 2, and Ron is here. So like this, no id, mutation, 3 data we have. This means now it's time for the query of let's say all the humans, name, gender, and the id. Get me this thing. You can see everything is coming from directly from the database. Amazing thing. Now next point is let's have one which is going to be the non-human. Now if I do this non-human thing, let's see what's going to happen. We pass this non-human data and we do the mutation, like here, character, and this time I'm just getting all these 2 things only. Let's hit it. It says data is invalid, name, dragon, gender. See what happening here is now we are passing less data, plus we are passing species which is not available in the mutation we have created. So in this mutation, let's go to the type we have here. In this somewhere we have this mutation, and mutation is create input. Create input doesn't have the species thing. So let's grab the species also for the input data. That's cool. And now here we have said that we need the date of birth is required. So I'm going to remove it, because if there is a non-human, it just need species, gender, and name. Okay. So yes, you can create two different mutation, but this is okay for now. Let's one more time run. Yeah, so here we are. So this is done, and now let's try a query for non-human, and we need all these things, and non-human is not available. Why? Because on our query we have non-human. This query is actually not working. So what if I just say give me everything? You can see now we are getting everything, and species is actually not stored for non-human also. We will fix it later, but we can see how we can easily create the data using the mutation, and then we have the query to fetch the data from the database. Let's move in the next episode to fix these things and see the real big thing in GraphQL. Welcome to the final episode of this GraphQL course. This is not the end yet, and I can say that this is really the beginning, because now you need to start exploring how GraphQL is used in the real application, in production, and now your journey of GraphQL really kickstart from this point, because now we are actually just finishing this course with updating a model to solve the previous problem which we faced on last episode. But as I said, this is not the end. You can ask me anything for this course on the comment below. You can email me and follow me on Twitter or Instagram or anywhere if you want. So now let's start this course so that we can end this course. Actually, start this video so that we can end this course. Speech is bad. Okay, so let's start. In the last episode, we had issue while creating a non-human from this mutation. We have this mutation for create character, and the first thing I can see here is it's returning the human. So this is not a good thing because we are creating the character, so it should return either human or non-human, both. So let's first go to the types, because here we have defined the create character mutation. Inside this, we are accepting the create input. That's okay. And here we are returning human. Instead of this, we need to return the character. Yes, character is actually an interface. Okay. So it doesn't matter if we return human or non-human, because both are actually implementing the interface character. So this is the way we can return the correct thing. And now in the create input, here you can see we have the species, so it also require the species. So let's try to create new character, and this time, since we need to create the character, and after that I need the species. So you can see now it's not asking giving suggestion, because I need to reload so that it will give me some suggestions. And okay, so that's not returning, so maybe so I can once again try this character. Okay, so now on the return part, I need to say that if it's non-human, then return a species. If it's a human, then return date of birth. And what data we need to find, or we need to provide, actually we need to provide most of the things, like name, gender, which is required. So name is test, gender, so something like this, let's say male, and then comes date of birth. And since we are trying to create a non-human, so it's not required, just required thing is species, and let's say dragon. Okay, and now we have some issue. It says, hey, it should be like the enum we have, so we need to do like this. Now before once again hitting the mutation, I want to show you here that yes, we are sending this, but if we go to the resolver and we have the mutation we are creating the mutation with a model called character. We are passing all the data, but character doesn't care about the species. So this means if I go to the model character, here you can see it says the fields are this. It doesn't have the species field here. So let's add this so that it recognizes species. So is it right? Correct? Is species. So we are done with this, and let's save this file. So I can save it without formatting, and that's it. This is the simplest thing we have to do. Now if we create the mutation, Yes, you can see now it's returning the species. This means if I try to do the query for all the characters, I need the name, species for non-human, and date of birth for human. Let's see what we are getting. So here is the thing: character, name, date of birth, name, date of birth, name, date of birth. But at the last, we can see name is test and species is dragon. That means this is the last entry is for non-human, and this is the real easy way to make changes in the model to what's that, to actually store the species in our database. So this is, I think, the high level, or you can say low level, whatever it is, for the GraphQL and Apollo server. Apollo how I can write Apollo server. Okay, so we have done with this big series, and I hope you liked it. And if you have liked it, please go and subscribe to Bitfume's YouTube channel. Share this video with others so that everyone get the real power of GraphQL. I hope you have enjoyed it. Let's start another amazing series from the next episode.